you've mentioned that the school, gosh, there's so many things here you mentioned, but one of the points that I picked up on was how parents are actually upset if their children don't get homework, right? And that's something that I see. I actually talked to a parent yesterday about this very issue. Can you explain to that parent that I talked to yesterday why, you've done some research on this, why homework and why having free time makes sense for a child, and why it makes sense that in 8 and 7.5 hours of school, that should be plenty of time to learn what they need to learn on a daily basis?
Well, I would even say 7.5 hours of school is too long, because when I did homeschool him for that first year and a half, I was lucky to get 3 hours, 4 days a week.
Right.
That was it. And I felt very neurotic about that. He fought me on things. I abandoned the writing curriculum I initially had for him because it just hit me. And again, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, but if there were one thing I could do differently, it would be to have let go of all the neuroses I felt when I first pulled him out, because that made it harder on me. It made it harder on him. I had heard from other homeschooling parents that you don't need that much time. I wanted to believe that, but sort of, we're kind of indoctrinated, right? Most of society tells you that, oh, you need to have this many hours. And so I just felt very nervous about it. But at one point, and I read this book, like I said, when he was an infant, called Einstein Never Used Flashcards. And it talked about, I wish I still had the book. I lent it to somebody. I've stopped lending books to people because I never get them back. And the things I remember from it were that, there's this huge baby money complex. Like, he never did baby Einstein videos. We didn't pay for Gymboree. We didn't do any of those things. I just stuck him on a blanket and he played with toys. And sometimes I try to join him and play with him, but he was not interested. The only time he wanted my attention was the minute I opened the computer or I got on the phone. Then it's like, but otherwise he was so content to sit and just play with, the stuffed animals and the blocks and whatever else.
Yeah.
And, he started talking early, and, we read to him too. Like, there's a lot of story time, but we never did any of those things that a lot of parents do. Like, we weren't trying to teach him math when he was 2, and we weren't trying to teach him to read. We just let him be a kid.
So in some ways you knew that the 7 hours plus an hour more of homework at night, that was wildly more than what was actually needed. And so it made it easier for you to actually push back on that. I think a lot of parents, they assume that more is always better. You learned that less can be better. And so that maybe gave you a little freedom.
Well, right. And I think it's because of what I read in that book, which I no longer have. I wish I could pull it out and cite what I read, but I don't even remember the specifics of it. Just that kids learn through play.
Sure.
They don't. And I'd read some articles about, at-risk kids who had been put in these studies where some of them had after-school tutoring, and other of those at-risk kids played board games. And the kids who got to do the afternoon program where they played board games actually did better in school than the kids who got the additional tutoring outside of school.
Yeah.
And so, I remember those things, and just watching his development without forcing early academics on him. And I think too, we had the good fortune of him starting out in first grade at the Accelerated Progress Program, and having the principal come out and say, well, research shows that, homework is counterproductive. And so I did actually have an authority explaining to me. And so they were just, they were a little bit different. They were ahead on that, they were ahead of the curve there.